I, Fred Dale, create smells in museums. Some years ago, I developed a chemical method of destroying unpleasant odours. Then, in 1982, I was asked if I could recreate the authentic smell of a Viking village for an exhibition. Since then, I've created smells for many museums, including the Cutty Sark. Recently, I also created the smell of a Greek island for a West End play. Signed, Fred Dale.
Would you like to tell them, Frederick, what it is you do?
I create authentic smells for museums and theme parks.
Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute.
Behind this door are two men who know the smell of success. You see, they realised that there was a few bob to be made by literally creating a stink. They discovered that there was an untapped market for the manufacture of smells, both pleasant and otherwise. And it all started with a tiny piece of wood. 6 or 7 years ago, a homesick Arab approached the company and wondered if they could reproduce the smell of this Iroka wood.
The next inquiry came from an Arab, and he lives in his palace and he misses the smell of the campfire in the desert. And they use a special wood. One in particular was Iroka. And this is burnt and gives off a very aromatic smell. So he said, well, look, we would like to have this smell to take us back to the balmy nights in the desert. Can you create the smell so we can use it in our homes?
Well, they succeeded. And since then, they've expanded their repertoire to dozens of different smells, ranging from medieval street scenes with open sewers to fields full of fresh flowers. And commercially, it's been a breath of fresh air. Ironically, the firm started out not by creating, but by actually getting rid of odious odours, using a special chemical fragrance dispenser. And this has proved to be a very good seller in places like hospitals, public buildings, and even mortuaries. With this in mind, you may well wonder why there's a market for the pungent pong of stewing meat, a wartime air raid shelter, or even decaying blue cheese. The main customers are museums. The Liverpool Maritime Museum needed to faithfully reproduce the squalor and seasickness of 19th century steamships. And the Jorvik exhibition in York wanted the unappetizing aroma of a Viking township knee-deep in rotting chicken bones and other revolting 9th century refuse.
How do you go about creating a smell? I mean, what's the process?
Well, we have an aromatist or a chemist who composes smells by various notes.
Whenever the firm's commissioned to cook up a new nasty niff or even the fruity smell of a pre-war greengrocer's, they call in expert Reg Newman from Chester. He's a perfumier, more used to dealing with fragrances costing up to £2,500 a litre than smells which assault the nostrils.
Well, it's a complete reversal to my normal business, and that's creating pleasant smells. For the museums, most of them are really unpleasant ones, like the rubbish heap at Jorvik, which is really unpleasant. We have pleasant ones like toffee and wash day, smells like that, which are quite pleasant. But in the main, they are definitely unpleasant.
What process is actually involved in manufacturing them then? How do you actually get that right mixture of different substances?
It's a matter of fine knowledge from fragrance of many years, and we have between 2,500 to 3,000 different materials, which consist of natural oils, gums, resins, and aromatic chemicals.
It's funny to think of a cool sea breeze or an 18th century coal fire coming in a bottle. The man behind the idea, Fred Dale, goes to great lengths to sell smells, even down to a sample case of assorted aromas. So when you go on to see a potential customer, how do you demonstrate to them what your product range is?
Yes, well, first of all, we have a look at the settings, the museum settings in particular, and we look for a visual aid, whether it's a coal fire or whether it's a cooking pot burning away. We then have a sample range, and for example, this one, we can recreate the smell of a balmy summer evening with the smell of cut grass, for example.
Oh yeah, it does smell fairly agricultural, I suppose you could say.
But yeah, it does add a lot of atmosphere to a museum that can perhaps look a little bit sterile, as they have been, but now we are adding that third dimension. As a contrast to that one, try that.
Oh, that's the worst thing I've smelled in a long time. What is that, in fact? Rubbish?
Well, that is a rubbish, acrid area. People, strangely enough, tend to remember the unpleasant smells more so than the pleasant ones.
So who'd buy that one?
Well, again, don't forget, we are used to areas now that have good drainage and sewerage. Well, in the 18th century and earlier, there was no sewerage system, so that everything was in the streets and people lived in with those sort of smells on a day-to-day basis.
So that would be for a museum or somebody?
Oh, yes, indeed.
A firm in Lytham St Anne's, with a nose for a good business deal, is doing a roaring trade in synthetic smells. If you can't afford a Rolls Royce, you can at least pretend with a device that makes your car seats smell of leather. And there have been stranger requests. There was the dank and musty scent they made to get the right atmosphere at the Haunted Hotel at Blackpool's Pleasure Beach.
Welcome to Uncle Jeffrey's Haunted Hotel, you ghouls.
What smell do you use on a roller coaster?
Fear.
Fear,
Yeah, I can guess what smell that'd be.
Yeah.
Well, I followed my nose to Tower World in Blackpool, but I can't hang around because I'm about to witness the birth of time. As the earth forms, you're greeted with a sulphurous stench of molten lava. Then, there's the heady Tyrannosaurus tar pit, which thankfully makes way for the sweet-smelling swamp area. A few thousand years on, and man discovers fire, but there's no smoke without smell. So who's behind these primeval pongs? Back in the swamp area, I met up with Fred Dale. Okay, Fred, I give up. Where exactly is the swamp smell coming from?
Right. These are the units very discreetly hidden in the settings that give off the smell that we are detecting now. Simply operated by electricity, the oil is placed in a metal beaker and that vaporizes into the atmosphere.
Other than exhibits, who else asks you to create smells for them?
Ice cream doesn't have a smell, obviously, while it's refrigerated, but we, again, can put in the smell of the vanilla ice cream, for example, and the strawberry ice cream, which is very enticing when people walk past the shop. A contrast to that is the fire brigade, who now would like us to create the smell of burning to educate young children to recognise the smell of burning.
I don't think I really want to ask this one, but what's the worst smell you've ever created?
Well, there's one that perhaps is quite strong. I'd like you to sample that one and test your reaction. This is what I think a dragon's breath would smell like.
That's foul. The wind of change in the aromatics industry might leave some nasty smells in the air, but one thing's for certain. The nose is definitely up and running.
Oh, that dragon's breath. My nose feels numb just thinking about it.
Can you describe it?
Never smelled it.
Never smelled anything like it, the lady says here.
Smell again.
Well, that's very true, Andy. You wouldn't have smelled anything like it because that is the smell of a dragon's breath.
That is a classic. Why on earth did you put together the dragon's breath?
Well, there was a theme park, Camelot, and they had this enormous dragon coming out of the theme park, and they wanted to smell.
Stand anywhere near.
And that was the smell, because people imagine dragons as fire, brimstone, and so that sort of smell gives that reaction.
Have you got any antidotes for these?
Well, not yet. It costs a lot of money to create them, so it's better to leave them floating around a bit. Well, I think the third sense was neglected in a lot of areas. The third sense of smell, of course. Museums and theme parks was lacking that experience of smells of the past. We were asked to do it. It was a challenge. As I say, most of our business is done in museums. We are asked to do the period of the 18th century. Jack the Ripper was one for Madame Tussauds that we were asked to do.
Be or not to be? That is the question.
Imagine the last 400 years since Shakespeare wrote those lines. Imagine British history reduced to a 5-minute London taxi ride and 8 smells. On television, you're just going to have to take my word. I smelled them myself, including the plague, the fire of London, and Queen Victoria's perfume, the oil of the Industrial Revolution. It's Madame Tussauds' new $16 million Spirit of London exhibit, with the smell of authenticity, thanks to a man named Fred Dale.
Well, yes, the smells of the past are extensive, and it was an interesting challenge, and really I never dreamt that it would have expanded to the way that it has done.
But the strangest order of all came from Lord Montagu. He'd built an 18th century museum in the New Forest, and he wanted to make it really realistic. So he asked the firm to create the smell of, would you believe, poverty.
Well, this is a difficult one because everyone has different interpretations of poverty, of course, and the only way that we felt that poverty was created was a dry, musty smell that perhaps you find in the older houses when there wasn't central heating and the ventilation that we have now. And we did this by trial and error until we found that we had got an atmosphere that we felt was poverty as it used to be in the old days. When Lord Montagu asked us for the smell of poverty, I mean, it was quite a challenge. But yes, it was the start of what has become now quite an interesting and a fascinating business.
So you were an air conditioning man, really?
That's right.
And so you're putting the smells back again now?
That's right. Those that I got rid of yesterday, I'm trying to sell
If only you
today.
could have bottled them up at the time,
right.
yeah.
How do you know when you've got the right smell?
Well, you have to have a long memory, or by trial and error, and get other people's opinion and let them smell the various components until we hit on the one that is everyone's interpretation as they remember baking bread or wood smoke as it used to be.
Fred Dale started out getting rid of smells for people. Now he does just the opposite, supplying 132 different odors, most of them bad, to every major historical attraction in Britain. For example,
here we have a wild stag. Stable and horses, perhaps one of the most unpleasant oils in the range is the fish market. Methane, of course. Whoa, try that one. That is a dragon's breath. It is a smell that would be very appropriate, strangely enough, in a First World War trench. There is the smell of urine in there, there's the smell of body odour, there's the smell of death.
the trench experience, complete with the stench of war, is a popular part of the Imperial War Museum in London.
Most of the smells Fred produces can be found in museums, like the smell of a sooty fire he created at the Lancaster Maritime Museum.
They're good.
That is
They're
creamy
very
toffee.
good,
The toffee that comes in a slab and you have a little hammer and you break it up, and that is the creamy toffee.
And that, what would the best use for that be?
That again is in the war years. Eden Camp in Yorkshire have reproduced the war years, and in York, of course, there are a lot of sweets and factories there, and the smell used to permeate through the streets, and that was the smell during the war years.
Where's the dragon's breath? Come on.
Oh no, don't.
Come on.
Oh,
no,
no,
come
don't,
on.
don't.
The Fishing Heritage Centre at Grimsby, the Eden Camp and Jorvik museums are amongst Fred's growing clientele, but he also supplies theatres and shops with smells that tempt the nostrils of customers.
Even children going to school, they're not encouraged to use their sense of smell, perhaps taking them out in the countryside and smelling spring, autumn and winter. And I think it's a sad reflection on our modern environment.
Chatham Dockyard Museum. Fred said he'd meet me here and he still hasn't arrived. Apparently, this is Fred's latest masterpiece. It's pretty good, isn't it? Shame about the smell, though. It's a good job I didn't say that to Fred, though. What have you done here, Fred?
I created the smell of the sweaty sailor, and also the general atmosphere that is around us.
What's your job?
I create smells, or I'm known as an authentic smell maker. That is the title.
Backbone of the Navy. It seems that as more and more museums try to bring history to life, Fred's called in to add the finishing ingredient.
We've got, as you see, lighting effects, sound effects, but now we've got the smell of the period, and that really brings it to life.
Fred's turned pong picking into a science. He started out in air conditioning, then got the idea that people might actually want to add the smells instead of taking them away, and now he's got his own business, although not everyone is thrilled with his unique speciality. What does your missus think?
Sometimes she's not very pleased, particularly if I come home with some of the oils on my hands. It takes at least 2 to 3 days to get it out of the pores. And as you get warm in bed, the smell gets stronger, and the smell of horses and dragons is not very pleasant. But I'm asleep, so I don't know.
You've heard of the phrase, smells like a brewery. Well, this should tickle your nasal hairs. Not only will the aroma of hops permeate the air of the new Brewery Wharf Visitor Centre, but so will a number of other, less pleasant odours.
Well, here we have a bottle of the hops, freshly brewed this morning. It's still warm. And to match this, we have to get it accurate. Now, by mixing a combination of natural oils and some synthetic oils, we hope to recreate the smell exactly.
Now, what about this secret potion you're making up?
Well, this is a fun one, actually, but it's very true to life. It's the one that perhaps people will react to, and it's an interesting one, but we'll see the results of it later.
The smells will be an integral part of the new attraction, which is due to open in March this year.
Fred Dale, who's putting together a fine collection, everything from a musty, damp smell, which we'd all try to avoid, to a fresh baked bread smell, which apparently is the most challenging of the smells that he produces.
This is a proud moment, Fred. As you can see, this is the secret formula that you've been making for us. Done.
Shall we put it to the test?
That's definitely like the real thing.
Yes. Not sure if I like that. Smells a bit like horse dung.
Well, I think that says it all. That is 18th century stables, horses, and is used in an 18th century street scene to create the atmosphere of that period.
We have a photograph from the Canterbury Tales at Canterbury, and you were looking there for the smell of horses and stables. Was that particularly difficult?
Yes, it was 18th century, and we needed the combination of horses and virtually raw sewerage that was in the streets at that time.
Wonderful.
The Cutty Sark, the last great 19th century tea clipper, now tied up on the Thames near London.
Can you ask them if they can sniff and actually smell the tea?
Est-ce que vous sentez l'odeur du thé? Oui.
Oui? You can smell it, yeah?
Oh, yes, I can, definitely.
Yeah, the smell is still on the ship.
Oh, really? After 100 years? A mystery for a trio of intrepid amateur smell detectives, escapees from today's deodorized, shrink-wrapped culture. Fred, you've been found out.
I know what that is.
Go on, what is it?
Leather.
I was called into the Jorvik Viking Centre to create an authentic atmosphere to tell the story of the Viking period. This is not my normal line of business. My main business is to get rid of smells, not to create them. But I have done a number of museums in the past, quite successfully.
Oh, it smells a bit like Christmas punch or something like that, or
Yes.
a potpourri, Christmas
Yes, it's close,
smell.
it's close.
Am I doing well?
Yes, you're doing quite well. And that was in York. They discovered a Viking village, and they said, look, we want the smells of the Vikings. But we did do it very accurately, because the research, when they discovered the village, they dug down and they discovered the food that the Vikings ate, which were very well preserved. And by sifting through the food, they did know exactly the diet of the Vikings. But then they discovered the toilet was just inside the doorway of their house, the pigs were in the house, the cooking was in the house. So, again, we got a good idea what the smell was going to be like.
Did anybody go and visit this museum after you got this?
The visitor arrives from the street in the 20th century, and we bring them gradually through the time tunnel in small electrically operated time cars, right down the ages through the centuries, where the smells become stronger and stronger and more obnoxious. It's strange that the unpleasant smells and the most obnoxious of smells are the ones that people go away and discuss and talk about. There are a lot of urine smells, horse manure smells. People threw their sewage into the street.
How about smelling your way back 1,000 years to Jorvik, the Viking village that eventually became the city of York?
The yards behind the houses fairly stink. The pigs root around here. Rubbish is dumped in pits. And the loos are just cesspits, holes in the ground. This old chap's trying to use one.
Smells are so much a part of the Jorvik Viking Center. They even sell scratch and sniff postcards. You can send the smell of this back home to your friends. Remember dragon's breath? There's also burning wood, apple, fish, and stewing meat.
The strongest impression I get is that terrible pigsty.
By the boat, and that fresh air smell, you could feel the change in it.
Sorry, sea breeze wasn't one of the smells. Smell oil syrup comes in liter containers that can cost more than $100 each, but go a long way.
I've been known to spill them on myself, which they hang around for about a week or so. Especially the rubbish one. Right. There we are, so off we go.
Off we go to fill vaporizers and timers. They heat up, the oil evaporates, and voila, essence of pigsty.
I don't know, I love the smell inside the house. I thought it could have been a little breadier.
I thought the apple smell stood out quite well.
The wood burning smell.
I thought it smelled just like the real thing.
Yeah, and the bread.
The bread was really nice.
Has anybody been to the Viking Centre? Because the smells are amazing.
Are they really?
Yes, I mean, wonderful is not quite the right.
Lingers.
Oh, that could kill flies.
Yes. So when you're walking through something like the Viking Museum in York, you would actually smell that wonderful kind of acrid, rubbishy smell, which is an old Viking. Yes. And if you were going through Madame Tussauds, you would smell this in the Chamber of Horrors.
You would.
And actually, he does some marvellous work also with the elderly, recreating smells from their past.
Can you smell the fire or the soot?
Much.
Not much. Can you smell the soot there?
A bit.
A bit. Good. And what happened with the oven when you did the bread in there? What else did you used to bake in it?
Buns. 4 or 5 dozen buns. Tea cakes. Oh, I used to bake. Used to bake loads of things, me.
And the joint at the weekend?
Oh, aye. Always cooked the joint.
Yes.
And it was lovely. It really was. My husband's parents used to cook the joint in front of the fire, you know, swinging in front of the fire. Hey, fancy. Taking a memory back all them years.
Yes, it's...
Oh, Lord. We lived in the country, you see.
So what about the smell of the horses? Can you remember that?
Oh, that's horrible.
It is. I've brought one with me again, the smell of horses. See if you can recognise it. Can you smell that?
Aye.
What is it like?
Horse.
Horse. Is it pleasant or unpleasant?
Unpleasant.
Unpleasant, is it? Have another sniff.
Oh, aye, unpleasant, though. I think so, anyway.
Can you smell the horses? And what can you tell me about horses in your day?
What kind of smells, though, do old people miss, do you think? You've said about fires and things like that, but...
Yes, I think perhaps wash day is another typical example when the lady of the house used to wash on a Monday and the house used to reek of wash powder, starch, and these smells, of course, have disappeared now. Everything's just put into a machine. I want you to close your eyes and think back to when you were children.
Fred Dale has his own brand of aromatherapy for the elderly.
Caramel. Caramel. Anybody else?
Caramel. It's reminiscing, isn't it? Going back in olden days, is this?
Reminiscence, because we feel that the children today are kept in an environment free of smells, odours.
That's that lot down there. They hadn't a clue what they were smelling.
But it's amazing when you talk about, all right, for an example, children come home from school, mother quite often takes something out of the fridge, puts it into the microwave and serves it on the table. But in the old days, the whole house had that smell of cooking, perhaps a stock pot that was going all day. The lady there, she remembers it quite clearly. But the children are now being brought up in this environment where they, even in the supermarkets, everything is packaged and sealed up. There aren't any smells.
But so what? So what?
Yeah, but don't forget, if you had a cold, you don't enjoy your food, do you?
That's very true.
What kind of smells can you actually create?
Virtually any smell, within reason, of course, but we get asked for mostly unusual smells and unpleasant smells.
I'm sure you don't just create awful smells. Can you produce nice smells as well?
Yes, we can. In fact, some of the nicest smells are nostalgic. A good example was the Shirley Valentine show in London, the stage show. We had to create the smell of a Greek island where she is sitting on the beach. And we managed to do this into the theatre, and people were transported right back to a Greek island. So that was very pleasant. In fact, when you're on holiday, the smells that you get accustomed to whilst you're on holiday, you store them away in your memory, and it's amazing how you can recall them. Shirley Valentine, which is having a lot of publicity now, with Pauline Collins, and in the second half, she's sitting on a Greek island, and they wanted the smell of a Greek island. We managed to do this. It was a bit of a hit and miss affair, but it worked by putting the smell in the air conditioning. So during the interval, we stored up this smell, switched the air conditioning on, and it wafted right through the auditorium in the second half. So they got the smell of the Greek island.
It depends on where you are in the Greek island. Are you in the toilets? I mean, are you in a restaurant?
No, we're somewhere in a eucalyptus grove.
Ridiculous.
And how many smells have you made in your career?
Currently 160.
160. What would be the hardest to make?
Baking bread.
Okay, this is the next one coming up now. It's all in the interest of science, ladies and gentlemen. Max, you're going to enjoy this.
Go in.
Think of a romantic evening.
Lovely.
Fine. Hey, hold on. No way. No way.
I haven't done that one.
Yeah, but you see, I just want to make something perfectly clear. No way was I hinting at what you seem to have leapt to.
They pump fresh bread smells at the front door. I noticed that the other day. And it does work. I mean, you do go in, it's the first smell that hits you because it's such a, oh wow, let's go and buy some fresh bread.
Now's a chance to get rid of some of my samples.
Fred Dale is taking the idea of smells that make your mouth water one step further. He's already selling smells to supermarkets in the hope that after one whiff, we're hooked to buy. I'm finding out how persuasive they can be against the already smelly background of a perfume department.
An apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Gosh, they're terribly potent.
Well, that amount in the bottle would cover 5,000 cubic feet, but we don't cover the whole supermarket. We're only really interested in the entrance where people walk through the smell. That is sufficient, because once they detect that smell as they enter, say the baking bread is a good example in a supermarket, then that's sufficient. We don't have to saturate the area with it.
Toast?
You've got a good nose as well. Yeah, it is. It's our interpretation of bread in a bottle.
Isn't bread meant to be the one that makes you rush out and buy the house and buy the store and do everything?
It is indeed. The supermarkets, of course, are pumping this through the stores now, and it is a very evocative smell. But bread is difficult to reproduce. You can only get that smell when the bread is burning. But the smell of baking bread is unique. There's no other smell like it. We package the goods to make them presentable, and of course, if we give the sense of smell, it's another form of packaging.
Do you think it really works, or is it just a bit of a con? I mean, do you think that smelling tangerines really gets people very excited?
I think it triggers off something in the brain, and they say, well, yes, we can smell tangerines, and it does induce them to buy. This, you can actually see this happen in stores where we put the actual smell of the good.
So how does a shopper react to a smell?
Shoppers react in a very positive way. If they smell, say, for example, chocolate, it conjures up in the mind perhaps a birthday, and it encourages them to buy.
Oh, it's chocolate.
Yes.
Oh, that is good. Actually.
Chocolate.
Yeah. It's funny, of all the scents, this is the one that it makes me immediately hungry.
Well, that is what we're trying to achieve. It's interesting, in the old days, they used to put coffee beans behind the counter, and the girls used to walk up and down and crunch the coffee beans, and the smell came out. So we are reintroducing the smells of the past.
Sainsbury's admitted to us this week that they deliberately piped smells from the bakery department to a point just above the main doors.
To create the pine smell in the airport concourse area, we simply use electrical vaporizers strategically placed in the area. It's a very simple and effective way of creating a pleasant atmosphere.
Just what appears to be the table light.
Well, that is the way we dispense the oils in a small electrically operated unit. The oil is simply placed into the beaker, and when that's switched on, it heats up and vaporizes or atomizes this into the atmosphere. In the studio, we could fill the whole of the studio, but we find it's not necessary to cover large areas, as long as we cover the entrance, so that when people walk into the setting, at that point is all that's necessary. But it does bring on a lot of research as far as smells concerned, because we don't use our nose, perhaps as we did many years ago. Children today have a very limited memory of smells.
My friend has developed his own odour diet, this time by sniffing a chocolate necklace.
It's Chocoroma.
A Chocoroma?
Chocoroma.
Now tell me, what's the principle of it?
The idea is for people who are addicted to eating chocolate to satisfy the craving by the inhalation to the brain. The brain is satisfied because it's smelling the chocolate.
Help that could come in the shape of this smelly sachet made by a company in St Anne's. The boss, Fred Dale, is no stranger to the world of smells. He's made aromas ranging from World War I trenches at the Imperial War Museum to some dragon's breath for a Lancashire leisure park. His latest niff for our nostrils is chocolate. Not real, but synthetic.
People eat chocolate because they enjoy it. But it becomes then a habit. They eat chocolate and they don't get the same pleasure because they have to devour it, if you like. But by inhaling the chocolate beforehand, it takes away that craving.
Plastic granules impregnated with the smell of chocolate are put in a pouch. The idea is that by smelling this, you won't need the real thing.
I would eat that. Have you smelled it? It's beautiful.
That's the chocolate necklace.
It's like Bonneville dark chocolate. It's really. But I'm not. I mean, I hear what you say, Fred, that it could actually put people off. But if you're overweight, it's because you like the taste of chocolate, and you like chewing it and eating it. Part of the joy is having it in your mouth.
Well,
how is that going to work?
Well, yes, I think a lot of it is a stress factor as well. People eat chocolate perhaps through boredom or through stress. And we found that the brain has a novel way of cutting off smells after a certain amount of time. And also the addiction to chocolate, of course, as you say, is the taste and also the smell, because the two are so closely related. And we found that if this is worn, say the housewife doing her housework and she's feeling the desire to eat chocolate, by inhaling that, it takes away the desire. We did do trials with one lady who was on 8 bars of chocolate a day, and when she contacted us, she said that if she hadn't got the money in her purse, she would go to a bank, cash a cheque, to get the money to go and buy a chocolate. Now that is serious.
Now you must know you're on a winner with this, whether it works or not.
Well, yes, but I think our reputation is such that our main line is in smells and we have to get it right. So the test that we're doing now, we have had excellent results with people who were eating 8 to 12 bars of chocolate a day, large bars, and they've now reduced it down to the odd square occasionally. So to me that really proves that we are going the right way.
So it's not just a gimmick?
No, certainly not.
Have you been sniffing away at that?
I have, yes.
And would you like a chocolate now if I offered you one?
Can I have one, please?
He's not as good looking up close, sure, he's not, really.
I don't know if I could eat the thing or not. Actually, I've got to say, does this mean I'm going to be working on smell-o-vision next?
It could all happen, it could all happen.
Now, I think we all know that if pressed, we can make at least one bad smell, but here comes a man who can make more than his fair share of out of order odours, and what's more, people pay him to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, please place a peg on your nose as you welcome the smell man, Mr. Fred Dale. Well, this one here, you've made one thing here which you obviously can never have encountered. There's no way, as far as I know, anyone could have smelt this. This must have been for
No, I think we had a bit of poetic license with that one. We imagined what a dragon's breath would be like: sulphur, fire, unpleasant.
Okay. You just
well, now we
well
can guess.
done, Fred.
Oh, we're trying it.
Now, I wonder, Max, if by any chance, huge leap of imagination, you could tangle with that one. What do you think that might be?
Your aftershave.
It's very nice, but every job is new, it's exciting, and we get a lot of pleasure from it. Yes, I think it's a wonderful thing. I'd never dreamt years ago that it would have expanded, and even abroad now.
The company says all the smells are non-toxic, and the factory budgie and cockatoo haven't fallen off their perches because of any ill effects yet.